Of all the stars that ever shone, not one does to wrinkle like your pale blue eyes. Like golden corn at harvest time, your hair sailing in my boat, the wind gently blows and fills my sail. Your sweet scented breath is everywhere.
Well, I suppose you have to go back before the TVG existed and where we were at as travellers. We were being represented by settled people, we were being represented by nuns and priests, and St Vincent de Paul organisation was one of the organisations I remember represented us on committees that were set up to look at issues like the accommodation committee in the local authorities. And I suppose we felt, or I felt, you know, that it wasn't good enough that settled people represent us, that we should be in there at the table representing ourselves. But it was very difficult because this was the structure that was in place, that it was settled people, and we lived with it for a while.
Got involved with a number of traveller women who were concerned in the city at the living accommodation that we were in. We were living on the opposite sides of the city. We didn't know each other very well either, but we were on what was known then as the Itinerant Settlement Committee, and we were extremely concerned about the conditions that we were living in both. I was living out in the Black Ash, and both of them were living on Spring Lane Haltonside. And no surprise to hear that Spring Lane Haltonside, even back then, was overcrowded.
At the time, it would have been very naive and wouldn't have understood the issues, but as time went on and as I did, I thought it was power and politics that mostly affected travellers.
And I suppose it became very clear very early on that the committee wasn't a political organisation, if you like. They essentially saw themselves as kind of a support, more along a charitable based approach.
I think about going to meetings and being told, aren't you baking apple tarts and things with such thing, and shouldn't you be happy, and you know, and I remember the anger and the frustration and how badly patronised we were, you know, and how little power we had.
Even though on one level they were supportive and sympathetic, just didn't see themselves as being involved in any resolution of that or any solution of that. And I suppose it became clear to me that we needed to be involved in that resolution ourselves, or developing some type of a response ourselves. So very quickly we moved away from the Cork Itinerant Settlement Committee.
So I remember at the very start, and we were very naive traveller women and we didn't have a clue, and we were getting some support from Niall Crowley in Dublin.
When I was in the Equality Authority, I suppose local traveller organisations were a key stakeholder in many ways, that you can't have a struggle for equality. You know, an equality authority is important, but you can't have that struggle for equality without the people themselves being involved. And the organisations like the Traveller Visibility Group were a key way for people to get involved, for travellers to get involved and to share their joint interests, to articulate their joint interests, and to give voice to a demand for equality for travellers. An equality that was about recognising traveller ethnicity, and an equality that was about ensuring that resources were channelled into the traveller community, but also in a way that respected that ethnic identity and that culture.
And Niall said he would ring us up. He would say, "There's a meeting on around funding, around community development, someplace," and he'd say, "Chrissy, you have to go to this, and you have to go to that. Doll, you have to go to this meeting." I remember saying, "Oh God, you know, Neil, we're not invited." He said, "It doesn't matter," and it didn't. I think we the term "fake it till you make it." We walked in, there wasn't a seat for us at the table, so we pulled up a stool and we sat down.
I mean, for years and years and years, decisions have been made about travellers without any travellers present or having any consultation on what decisions were being made about travellers.
You know, minorities groups, just by their very nature, have less power in society than others. So the advocacy is a key tool to be used to leverage resources, to make the case for more resources to be provided, and to make sure that the issues within a community are listened to, that they're responded to, that they're advocated for, and that they're followed through as well.
Things happen for a reason, and I suppose I was at a stage where I was just after having a new baby, and I had quite a negative experience of being segregated within the maternity services when I had him. And so I started to question within myself as well, if I wanted things to change for my children, surely it wasn't okay to accept settled people, to expect settled people to change them for me, and that I needed to be part of that. So I suppose Anne was going through a lot of stuff as well, questioning, you know, what she could do.
At the time, I lived on a site in Cork where my children had to be bused to a different area to school because the local schools wouldn't accept them.
So I suppose within that it was quite timely, and it was something that we went about. We asked people, what is it that we need in Cork, you know? What is it that we could be doing different? And you know, there was this concept of community development. Ask us what community development was, we hadn't a clue, you know, but we knew whatever it was, we needed to be involved in it.
Subsequently doing a course in Maynooth on community development, at the same time trying to do a bit of work here in Cork.
And we start meeting ourselves up on Spring Lane, actually, in Anne Burke's trailer, and we organised a number of women to come in. And it was more over a cup of tea now than anything else, and organising that. So that was kind of the initial kind of start, and so we do need to organise something. It needs to be something the Travers can be involved in. It needs to be something the Travers can own.
I remember a visit to Dublin to something that Pavy Point had organised, a meeting around travellers, and for the first time I would have seen travellers very articulate, very well able to speak about the issues, and were speaking on their own behalf. And that's what would have drawn me into getting more involved with traveller issues.
Well, I've been involved in the traveller movement since 1985, and when I reflect back at that time, there were really only a handful of travellers who were involved in the struggle, travellers who were actively involved in trying to effect positive change for their own people. But over the last 25, 30 years or so, there has been an absolute explosion of traveller activists, you know, very strong, very confident, very articulate activists who have a very good analysis on the traveller issue and on the traveller question and how traveller issues should be addressed. And those traveller activists are doing Trojan work both at local level, regional level and national level.
It's really important to have local traveller organisations feeding into the national traveller organisations. We're a national membership organisation. So our members around the country are the core of the organisation, and we wouldn't be able to operate without our members. And our whole structure is built on building on the expertise that our members have around the ground. They have their fingers on the issues around accommodation, education, employment.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that travellers have benefit from or gained is the confidence to represent their community and the confidence to represent the needs of the travellers in their area. And if you look at traveller organisations now compared to when the Irish traveller movement set up a couple of years ago, I mean, there's a whole new cohort of travellers out there who have not only got the skills but the confidence to represent their community and their issues, both at a local level and a regional level and also at a national level. And I think that's very encouraging. That wouldn't be there without the support of local traveller organisations.
I mean, there was good support nationally from traveller organisations, and I remember I suppose some individuals, like Neil Crowley in particular, coming down and giving advice on, you know, access and trying to access funding to get a bit of research done.
It was led by travellers and traveller women, so I think it was probably the first time in the country that travellers and particularly traveller women took a leadership role in looking at the issues that impacted on their lives.
Not that it wasn't known what was happening with travellers and what the issues were, but if it's carried out by a research organisation, it's a stronger calling card then to go to funders and to go to the agencies to try and get changes to take place.
For traveller organisations, the challenge is going to be trying to get travellers on board, because travellers have already been identified and over-identified in some cases, and a lot of that identification has been negative because it's through the media and through the incidents that happen internally within the traveller community. So trying to put a positive focus on the community is going to be difficult. But I think that, again, like the Irish Travel Movement, it's important that the local organisations are involved in that and that they're able to clearly outline what the consequences for travellers being recognised as an ethnic minority group are and what the consequences for them not being recognised are going to be.
And at that stage, I remember, it wasn't even an organisation, it was, what will we do? So it was like, it was making travellers visible, because travellers were invisible at the time. So even pre the name, that was the discussion I remember you having. So it then became Traveller Visibility Group, based on the research.
What we had then was a real template in terms of this making travellers visible, what we ended up calling the report. And that report then gave us, if you like, a launching pad to say this is what we need in Cork.
I suppose I always think about the name of the organisation, and a lot of people ask why the Traveller Visibility Group, and it's hard to believe, and it's still there to a certain extent, how invisible we were. We were living on sites that were discarded pits, quarries. We were living on sites that were former dumps, and 10-foot walls built around us. We were represented by settled people. Our children were brought to different schools, not in the local area. We were so invisible.
The whole thing was about making travellers visible, and sometimes the traveller perspective was negative that was visible. So how you maintain the positive and the policy work that TVG was clear it needed to engage in, but keep travellers in Cork City engaged and responding to their needs. And that was the challenge for the first managements. I remember the first management.
We set the group up in a way then that it was constituted that we'd have to have 50% management of travellers at all time, and that there'd be a strong leadership of travellers within the management. And we have been very successful at that.
It's the first time probably I would say in Ireland that you had travellers determining what the structure they wanted. And I suppose at that time then what would have happened is, I remember we got support from Stacia Crickley, Niall Crowley, that had a huge, I suppose, human rights perspective, and it was saying what kind of management structure could ensure that travellers remained central to it.
We were 2 years voluntary working before TVG was formally set up.
When I started with the organisation almost 15 years ago now, we were a very, very small staff. There was just 4 of us, and we worked out of a 2-roomed flat up in the Glen. Even the physical changes from working from a 2-room flat with 4 staff to working in this huge, well, to me it's a huge building. Even though I'm here a long time, it still feels huge.
I think it would have been much easier for this building to happen had the organisation been structured differently, been more kind of maybe politically acceptable, if you like. But it was important that it was traveller-led, and now this is very much a community-based, not only organisation, but the building and the things that go on here. So it's just gone from strength to strength.
Since 2007, when I did come on board, the creche hadn't been opened yet. You know, the building was there, the funding was there for 2 full-time workers and for equipment and things like that. So I suppose I've seen the creche come from an empty canvas really up to what it is today. And I suppose the important thing, the most noticeable change, was that when the creche opened first, it was targeted completely towards the traveller community. But in the last maybe 3 to 4 years, we've seen it open up, and we've seen huge integration between a number of different nationalities. We have children at the moment from Nigeria, we have children from Russia, Poland, Lithuania, we have settled Irish children, we have traveller Irish children.
Before TVG was here, travellers had a lot of unmet needs within Cork. There was very poor service delivery for travellers, and there was a very poor uptake of services for travellers. And since like the primary healthcare teams, the health teams within the TVG, you know, there is a regular engagement and contact with the traveller community in Cork.
As you know, health development work is very broad, and that includes a lot of outreach, helping groups set themselves up, accommodation support, youth group, developing health programs.
One of the key things that has been very successful for TVG and for the health service participation with the Traveller organisation is the development of the primary health care for traveller women.
Well, I've been working with individuals and with families over the last 7 years. It started out, I suppose, more working within groups and getting to know the community, building up a relationship with people in the community.
Well, I guess in the 4 years that I've been here, I think the most significant development was getting the primary healthcare workers employed in the project, because they had been waiting for the roles for a long time. And I think the community had been waiting for them as well, so it was great that eventually we got the 4 workers on board and we got them into the project from the very beginning actually that I came in. And since then they've been doing some really good pieces of work within the community and have really built a very good rapport with their community, and people really trust them.
I work in particularly with women, especially women's health development. I organise groups such as getting women back to education, and particularly around the literacy and computer courses that we run here in TVG. I also advocate for travellers on different committees as part of my role here in TVG. And I would also give one-to-one support, in particular to younger traveller families that are homeless across the city at the minute.
We had the Cork Gay Men's Project come into TVG and deliver a training workshop with traveller men, which was a first. And the feedback from men was very good, you know, around the issues that came up with that training.
I was doing voluntary work in TVG, and when I was 18, I came back on a community employment scheme for 3 years.
The traveller community health workers, they know their community, they're from their community, they live and they experience it, and they can really put the issues forward much better than other people can, you know, because they work with people on a day-to-day basis, they live with them as well, and they know what's happening on the ground and they have that insight.
We did the addiction tree with the young traveller girls, which was fantastic, and we went on then to do the piece of work with the traveller men and the clients in Shine around dual diagnosis, which was a great success, and I suppose put mental health out there. And I suppose the very last thing I did that I really loved, and we did it as a team as well, was the rap with the young boys and girls, the traveller boys and girls, and we did it with Gary McCarthy.
A particular piece of strategic work that TVG and the Cork Traveller Women's Network are working on together, particularly over the past year, but for a long time before that, has been trying to support the families on Spring Lane to work towards accommodation rights.
Men then have regularly engaged with the project since 2010, and since this leadership programme. We've run a literacy, we've been running back to education initiatives.
I'm involved in the woodwork training in Fairhill's men's group. I was involved in the read and write classes. I was involved in the carpentry.
I'm involved in the TVG for the last 4 years, and we do computer classes, reading and writing classes, and we do woodwork classes.
I remember a man saying, you know, he was ashamed coming into the building, and because if there was women in the kitchen, they'd stand out in the hall. But we see them now; they'll just come in and they'll put on the kettle and they'll make their own cup of tea and they just get on with it.
People are seeking support on a weekly basis. I think a lot of people within the traveller community feel that they are not being heard by statutory agencies, in particular Cork City Council. It's become very difficult for people to have their situation heard.
When I get through to the council, I can't do it. I get someone here to do it for me, and I find them very helpful like that.
TVG challenges perceptions within agencies as well, and within workers within agencies, because I would contend that maybe for lots of meetings you can go to, you can be talking about travellers, but they're not usually participating in the discussions.
And I think every town and city should have something like TGV to come to for men. If whatever they want done, whether it's a form filled in or whether it's advice on where to go or who to talk to, when you come down to the TGV, there's always someone there to help.